Well, here we are. Welcome back. In case you forgot what you subscribed to or why, this is After the Ashes, beautiful Altadena's opinionated but well-informed podcast on disaster recovery through a public policy lens. I'm your co-host, Shawna. We are recording this episode on Thursday, July 9th, and I'm here with my co-host, Steven Sachs.
Hey there. What's going on, Shawna?
Nothing good.
Well, all right. Come on.
It hasn't been all bad. In fact, we should open by saying, gosh, dear listeners, thank you for sticking with us because we know we've been gone. We said at the outset, when we started this podcast, that we would record when we had things to talk about and that may or may not be all the time. We have had a lot to talk about, but we have been gone. I couldn't believe it. We have not recorded since May. So we're looking at almost a 2-month hiatus. But that was, not because there were not things to talk about. It was because Steve and I both had travel. Steve had more trips for himself. I had my own trip, like for real trip. I spent some time in Portugal and Spain because I just needed a break from all this. And I'm quickly feeling like I need another break. Like I should have just hightailed it back onto a plane. And of course, we've been in Sacramento again, and we've got a lot to talk about. So I think instead of trying to chop this into a few episodes, brace yourself. I think we're going to go ahead and run long on this one and just get everybody caught up to what may have been missed the last 8 weeks. And also, we're rounding out this week into the official 18 months post-fire. That was July 7/8 was 18 months post-fire.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are.
Yeah. All right, Shawna. Welcome back.
You want me to take it away?
Well, I mean, you helped put this thing together, so I'm just here as your, color commentary. You're the play-by-play.
Steve, you're I don't know how to describe you today. Stephen, I said to Steve seconds before we started this podcast, this email does not find me well.
No.
The last 8 weeks have been rough, guys. Won't even lie. So let's start with within the news. We typically, kick these off with a media roundup. We're going to do a little bit of that, but also it's going to be a catch up on the issues too. So, since we just talked about the fact that we're in the 18-month mark, right? We're looking at 18 months since the fire. There were some really sobering stats that have come out as a number of surveys and research has been done on looking at where we land. And, I saw these numbers from Department of Angels and I thought, gosh, that can't be accurate. And then I saw that they were, the numbers were confirmed by United Policyholders, who was doing some of their own data, and a third organization who I'm sorry, I cannot recall the name of course. But the point being that, this is not one organization
PBS.
and one. Yeah, it was PBS. Thank you.
No,
saying
CBS.
This. Oh, CBS. No. Well, CBS reported it.
Oh,
but they were reporting the some of the other data. So there's actually someone else who did some looking into this. But to give everybody kind of a little overview of where we're at the 18th month mark, 2/3 of Altadena fire survivors remain displaced. That's 66%. 1% of homes have been rebuilt, which is about 100 homes. Those are obviously not all survivor homes, which we know because developers have picked up at least half of lots for sale. We have 1,796 under construction. We have seen 2,981 permits for structures. And again, that's not just a single family home, but structures, which could be multiple structures on one lot. So for example, we know 1,200 ADUs currently underway right now. Half have lost or will lose insurance in the next year. Only 28% feel they will ever recover from this. And as I said, at least 50% of lots have gone to developers so far and counting. As we see a lot of families feeling like selling their lots may be the only option they have to not look at being completely financially destitute. And as we heard in our last kind of at the 12-month mark, and I'm sorry, I've been like, my allergies have been terrible. I'm probably not alone. A lot of folks too are running out of ALE. If they have not already, they are now.
Yeah.
And, these stats didn't really go heavily into what's happening for renters, but we know anecdotally that nearly all of our renters remain displaced. They're definitely part of that 2/3 number. And we had, from all of the data points available, 37 to 38% of Altadena residents were renters. So it's not an insignificant number.
Mm-hmm.
So, and those folks have all been kind of left in the wind because there are no rentals for them to come back to. And even where there are, they are wildly cost prohibitive. So, it kind of gets us into a lot of questions, right? Gosh.
Well, this is the moment that everybody's been waiting for. I mean, and not in a good sense. It's not like, we waited with bated breath. This is the moment that everybody was fearing and everybody knew was coming. It's
Yeah.
the moment of reckoning, right? The shock is over, the money is starting to dry up or shift. Um, and the next 6 months is going to be an absolutely critical time for the town of Altadena and what that composition is going to look like going forward.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to
It's,
open up, the kimono has to open up. So, I mean, as much as it's about Altadena, it's also about where our political system is and, seeing the signs that we've been seeing throughout the last year and a bit and that we've been commenting on, whether on the Substacks, through your Facebook, or here on these podcasts. I mean, it's pretty obvious those those receipts are coming due, and we've got the receipts. I mean, it started with the climate resilience district, and setting that up where it took some of the power out of the hands of the community, and from there the pieces and parts. I mean, it even goes back to Gavin Newsom and the EO, the executive order he gave the Palisades, not us, and essentially, the county saying to developers, it's open business, it's open season in Altadena, do whatever the hell you want. Um,
yep.
like, we are at a point where all of these bills are coming due, and all the warnings that everybody has heard and ignored. And I think, when we get into SB 1090 is probably the flashpoint to show the holy shit moment where people are going, oh, this is happening. And all the things I've heard are actually going to take place now.
All
So,
the things that we've been warning about are in fact happening, and relatively quickly. So,
well,
before we get into all of
it's
that,
like all
let's,
train wrecks. It goes very, very slow and then very, very
yeah.
fast.
Yeah. It is a train wreck. So going back in, like we just kind of got a little overview of the state of the rebuild along with those 18-month statistics. And I will refer always people to the county dashboard that is updated daily. So if you want to see the latest, you can always find that data there. But I mentioned that we know we've got 1,200 ADUs under construction currently. And that's kind of an interesting thing because you hear this, I know just again anecdotally what's being discussed in our groups and in the broader community that a lot of people, certainly not all, but a lot of folks who are building, who are Altadena fire survivors who are building ADUs, are building them first so that they can move onto their property, right? We have a lot of people doing that because financially that's their only option. They've got it. They're out of ALE. They're in trouble. So even where I was talking to someone in our community who is they're a larger family. They've got multiple kids, dogs, two adults, and they're going to be living in a tiny ADU really soon because that is their only choice while they wait to start the construction of their home because like so many they're waiting on litigation, they're waiting on insurance proceeds, and they've got to get past those hurdles to get into a house. But it takes us to the question of we keep hearing that that ADUs are going to be used, and this is going to tie into our next conversation for our next topic, but that ADUs are going to be used, to preserve generational wealth, as if they're going to be rented out. And, I and many others continue to raise, questions on that of like, is everyone, and I know you have too, like, is everyone in Altadena going to be a landlord? Like, is that what we're saying? Because I
Well,
don't think I personally, I don't think that's real. I think that is the talking point that is used is like, oh, we
Well,
need
because
it,
it
we
goes
need it,
back
we
to
need
the
it.
LA Times article that was written last spring, over a year ago, where they had the one fire survivor who basically said that the only way they're going to be able to rebuild is to become a landlord and have a rental and do ADUs and SB9 and all the other Michigas. And
Yep.
I mean, that's all well and good in theory, but talk to landlords, especially small landlords in Los Angeles County in California, and you know there are a lot of risks associated with having not only being a landlord, but living on the front house and having people renting behind you, and maybe they may not be the ideal tenant. I mean, many are. I'm
Yeah.
not, this is nothing against
They, of
renters,
course not. It's
but
about the
there are
reality, though.
people that rent that, aren't necessarily always that can be very difficult. And trying to evict someone from property that you aren't living at is not easy. I've talked to many
It's
people
nearly
that have.
impossible.
Yeah.
It's nearly
And
impossible.
imagine having to live with somebody in your back house who's basically living there rent free, and
Yeah.
you need to have that property to be able to make your mortgage payment, your property tax payments, and all the other things that are going to go into it. I think it's been facile in terms of how it's been offered. I think it's used as a talking point by certain political groups that
Mm-hmm.
this is the solution to the affordability question. A, we're going to add all this additional capacity, and B, all of a sudden this is going to solve everybody's problem. I don't, I've always maintained, and people who have read my Substack know this, and I'm hopefully going to help write something up for the legislators in the fall or during the summer about. I think that this is as much a supply distortion problem from an affordability perspective as it is a, actual affordability, as a supply itself problem. I know that there are people that disagree with that, especially in the building, in the development industry. But I mean, you can't have the significant number of properties held off the market because of Prop 13 and not expect that that's going to distort prices to the extent that it has. And, here's another major issue. We're seeing a microcosm of what is going to happen in 15 years here in Los Angeles
Yeah.
and Altadena now, where we had a significant number of property owners who were over to the age of 65.
Yeah.
And how many are going to rebuild, how many are going to sell, and what does that do to the supply overall? And if you have a significant number of people or baby boomers that are going to be selling in the next 15 years, plus you're going to be adding all these affordable houses on the market, all this housing that we're going to be building, all this density we're going to be building, and we have a population that's not increasing here in California, what does that mean?
Yep. What does it mean?
And here's the other nasty thing that nobody's talking about with the rental market is, I don't think it's going to affect single property owners, but it will affect those that are looking to add density, in 5 to plus units. Most of the debt that they take on to be able to do those projects is at the fixed price of the market rate of the rents that can be gotten. So what does that mean? You talk to a property owner and they got a $3 million note on a building. The expectation is that the rent underneath in those units will meet the standard to be able to make the monthly payment. If the rents start decreasing, you're going to have a bunch of foreclosures. And this is like the policy issues that we're dealing with 1090, and we can get into a lot of this. And the fact they want to increase it's AB 2005, which is increasing SB 9 when it hasn't even been really implemented. We just got
Okay,
SB
Steve, you're jumping
79.
ahead. I'm going to
I
rein
can't
you
help it,
in.
Shauna, because these are major issues that we have to
They are
address. And I just think that we're seeing some of these major policy decisions being made in a
battles.
laboratory that is Altadena.
Yeah, the battles are all going to play out here. We are the battlefield
Well,
for what's going to
we're the guinea
happen.
pigs, is what
Yeah,
we are.
we are. We are. Well, I keep saying we're the canary in the coal mine, but yeah, guinea pig works too. And it's nothing good that these guinea pigs are being subjected to. But let's talk about some more of that. I mean, I bring this up with the ADUs because, aside from the, myriad issues that you raise, that become the downstream of this, just on its face, to your point, we keep hearing as a talking point from certain organizations and electeds that, like, oh, this is, we have to do this, we need this ease, and we need to create all these new ADUs for people, to have generational wealth. And I don't necessarily buy that line. I do think, because we know it's real, that we had a lot of Altadena renters living off book in Altadena. We know that's real. Like, we had a lot of folks who were living in, for example, an unpermitted garage conversion for
Sure.
$500 a month, right? Or something like that. A lot of those familial situations. And there's no question that those folks need to be able to rebuild those those situations on their lots and have the right to continue to do that. But I just don't buy the talking point that, you know, all of these folks in Altadena are going to suddenly become landlords, because I don't think it's real. And I don't, not to mention there's no parking, but we'll get to that in a minute. But, you know, we talk
Well, the
about the,
logistics of all of this is just
I
beyond.
know it's insane. We have, you know, just looking at LA County short-term rental laws that I think a lot of people are not aware of. Like, you can't even just have an Airbnb here. It's very limited how you can rent. It's very limited the number of nights per year you can have someone in for a short-term rental. Outside of that, it has to be a minimum 30-day rental. And all of this, you know, goes into a tax component, right? You got to register with the tax collector. You have to pay a certain amount. I have to pay a registration fee and a certain amount of tax on your earnings. So I don't think that everyone is
Well, in Shawna, I know
really aware of what this is going to mean.
I just got a notice from the county yesterday or the day before about if I'm a landlord, you know, I have to fill out all the stuff and file my taxes. I mean, I think most of these people who've been living off the books that, you know, we have been,
Yeah.
you know, that we're all trying to save are, that's all going to change. Like the county's going to know if there's a massive ADU on your property, you're a target now.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
all
it's
these,
a lot. It's a lot to consider. So, you know, as always, caveat emptor, buyer beware. There's going to be a lot to consider. Moving on, we've got some other news that popped up kind of quietly this week, that LA County wants to put affordable housing groups first in line to buy apartment buildings. That was a measure or a
it's
motion rather
COPA,
brought. Yeah, it's that's what
community
it is, and it
something
was, yep,
purchase something
brought
rather.
forth by Hilda Solis, that I have no doubt our supervisor Barger will veto,
No,
or you know,
they all voted in. It was a unanimous decision.
no way.
Yeah, well, Barger, like even if Barger wanted to veto it, it's going to go 4-1. What difference
I
does it
know it
make?
would, but I'm surprised though. I'm surprised because that is not generally her voting MO, and I don't think others in that sphere were expecting that. I did not see that, but I find it interesting, but also, you know, legally questionable.
Well, that
Can
I
we
mean,
do this?
I think
I mean,
that
on its
you're getting
face,
to a
I'm not
point where it's almost
opposed.
like
I'm not opposed.
condemnation. Yeah.
But can you even do this? And I say that because of the topic we're going to get into next, and, like, you know, understanding the legal challenge that anything like this is going to face from developers. So yeah, I
Well,
just
I mean,
it's
I think there's a constitutional challenge. I don't think you can take the property without, you know, personally, I can't imagine that you can mandate how somebody sells it. You know, if again, I not my problem. That's for the lawyers to figure it out.
yep, that's kind of my attitude too, but
I have
it is
enough
going to be
shit
an
that I deal with that I don't need that on top of it.
you know, like, I don't need that shit. We have enough to deal with. There's also here's I so I'll say to everyone listening, Steve is about to go off the rails on this one. Some other news that didn't make the news because it was very conveniently left out of the news, was that very recently a nonprofit by the name of Uplifters in the Palisades secured a $250 million PIB, that is a private activity bond.
Well, they've applied. They've gotten the
They've
approval
they've
from
they've got
LA.
it.
They have to still get approved from the state.
Fair enough, but the paperwork's been stamped. It's out there. There's receipts. That, folks, is $250 million in a bond, non-taxable bond, that is for quote unquote affordable housing. And what, may you wonder, are they going to do with that in the Palisades? What affordable housing is there in the Palisades? Well, let us tell you. It will be approximately 60 homes. And for those who want to do that
It's
math real
now
quick,
65. It's 65.
okay, we're still talking about $4 million homes
Yes.
that fire survivors in the Palisades will be able to rent for a limited period of time, which is something like 12 to 18 months.
Yep.
And following that period, they would have the option to purchase that home. And if they were not able to purchase the home, the nonprofit can sell the home for fair market value, and they then keep and retain that money.
So that's affordable.
Affordable to whom? I'm like, I'm in the wrong fucking business, Steve. I don't know what's going on. This is,
Okay. Look, again, I just think that this is something the media has missed. And I
yeah.
think there are
Oof.
reasons why the media has missed it. And I think that that's for the media to find out. They can do a little bit of digging and find the answer to this. It doesn't take a
Yep.
genius to do the math. But, the way it was constructed was there's supposed to be a public meeting. The public meeting was held at the private law office of the lawyers representing the bond issuance with no the public notification was in something called the Metropolitan Independent or News or something like that. I have no idea what this is. They picked some obscure publication to do it so that nobody would know. It wasn't anywhere that anybody would normally be able to get to. The bottom line is it stinks to high heaven. And
Yeah, it does.
look, this is an organization that was set up a year ago. I mean, this is a 501c3. Fortunately, they're a 501c3, so give them that.
It's not a fiscal sponsor for once, so we got that.
For once. But they have never, they were not in existence a year ago. Now they're going to get the single largest private activity bond. So people got to understand, private activity bonds we have tax exempt bonds in this country, and most states get a fixed amount that you can use for nonprofits, charities, et cetera. So hospitals, universities, nonprofits, homeless housing, all those things, they all fall under the private activity bonds. When they're going to go put a tax exempt bond out there, bondholders buy these bonds at a reduced rate because they don't pay tax on the interest. So the idea is that this is helping public good. Normally, these are like $10 million offerings, maybe a $20 million offering, because we get a total cap for the state of $5 billion for all of California. That is all 40 million people that live here. Okay. So let's just say LA being 10% of the population in the city, that would constitute, let's say $500 million of that number, because that's 10% of the offerings, right? This one entity got half of what LA City's entire allocation would be. This is the single largest entity receiving a private activity bond in the history of California. And they didn't exist a year ago. I mean, this is like...
Yeah. The grift isn't even trying to hide. The grift is just grifting.
But then if it was going to be out in the open and there was nothing to hide, why take the measures they did to try to obscure the information? And why has it not been published? This is the largest single bond offering for rebuilding that we've had. Nobody's done something like this. And yet, nothing in the LA Times, nothing in the Daily News, nothing in the California Post, nothing in the media at all. Why? Because the state still hasn't signed off on it. Once the state signs off on it, because people can still go up there and screw this up. And that's the big issue. They've had to do these certain public things, but they could not come out and, celebrate it yet, because people are going to wait a second. An organization didn't exist a year ago is getting the largest single private activity bond in the history of California for affordable housing for 65 units for $4 million a piece in the Palisades. I mean, sure, the Treasury technically can't stop it, but holy shit, this has got to be one of the biggest pieces. I mean, holy God, how did you pull this off? And whoever it is, my hat to you guys. Like, wow. And here's the thing I still think, and I've told you this, Shawna. We here in Altadena don't have a settled land use issue yet. The Palisades, they know where they are because they have that executive order. And they have that fire zoning. And they know that everything's going to have to be single family. They cannot push through an 1123, 1116, or an SB 9 into the Palisades. So, single family, that's their play. They were trying to get that sorted out here, but we still don't have the answer yet. And that's why SB 1090 is really funky. At least that's my opinion. Because if it's good for the Palisades, it's probably good for Altadena. We just don't know how they want to do it yet.
Yeah, and this is coming. So I can't wait to see which nonprofit is going to get this here, and what are they going to build? Is it going to be $1.5 million homes? Is it going to be $1 million homes? I don't know.
No,
I'm very curious to see.
It's going to be SB 1123 stuff.
Or is it? I don't know. We'll see.
I'd be willing to bet you here it's going to be about density.
You think so,
It's not going to be single family.
No, I know. Probably not. So I will say this is actually a good dovetail before we get into the kind of our legislative overview and talking about SB 1090 and other things that have been happening and kind of taking all the air out of the room the last few weeks. I wrote a piece for those who read the Substack. I wrote something, last month about the fact that Altadena is still rebuilding without a plan, and that the greatest threat to recovery remains the lack of plan, and density, in particular, density without a plan. And I think that we're still waiting for that. I know that as we were looking back, at this 18-month mark, Steve, you and I were talking about your Substack from last September, the first rumbles when you did your first fictionalized account
Yeah.
around some things
Well, it
happening with
wasn't
the
that one
senator.
was still kind of fictional. It was one of the first that sort of opened up that genre that I like
Yeah.
to use.
Yep. So, I think that's it's a good time to go back and revisit those for anyone who has time and inclination to go read, because they both really set up kind of where we are and what we're dealing with. Other news, our EFC's LTRG, God, we love an acronym around here. For anyone who does not know what this is, the EFC is the Eaton Fire Collaborative that now hosts the Eaton Fire Collaboratory. And the LTRG is that body's long-term recovery group. And they had their first round of board seats seated last year. That's a process that I, was still a little bit more active with EFC when that was happening. And I think they did as good a job as they could after some starts and stops putting that together. The first round of board seats were up for re-election, and there were 3 vacated seats that were open for election of new individuals. They, knowing that they wanted to broaden the field, opened up the candidacy to a number of people, including because EFC right now, the people who get to run, the people who get to vote, they're all member organizations. So as you can imagine, you have a very heavy slant towards nonprofit entities and these fiscal sponsored entities. It's not about individuals, but they opened this up deliberately to individuals so that there would be more fire survivor and community representation. And a number of people were asked to run for those seats, including Steve and myself and a handful of others who did run for those seats in hopes that one of us would get that, and there would be a little bit more community representation and not just nonprofit representation. There is some community representation, just not a lot. And a couple of those folks were rotating out or vacating their seats because they have other life things happening and could not do it all. But those election results came out last week while a bunch of other chaos was ensuing. And it was very interesting to see that none of those candidates who were the community candidates was either, picked up a seat. All of the incumbents were reelected, every single one of them. And then of those 3 new seats, they all went to nonprofit orgs.
And they were
Not one of them.
non-Altadena residents
Actually, that's
either.
not true. That is
Okay.
not entirely true, because
Okay.
one was not nonprofit org. One was someone who is out of the Pasadena mayor's office.
Okay.
But the point being, it's
Why is
the
the Pasadena
machine.
mayor's office in our long-term recovery group? Well, I guess Hastings Ranch, but I mean,
Again, I don't think it's that those folks shouldn't be represented. The issue is a balance of representation, and that despite best efforts was not achieved, in part because of who's voting, right? And it
well,
becomes a bit of a club. Like, the only people who get to vote are the member organizations. It's not like it's open to the community at large. So I think it just begs the question that as we continue to say that we have to put survivors first in the rebuild and recovery, and that we have to really listen to survivor needs and what is happening in the survivor community and what folks actually want, and how we shape and drive whatever happens next. It is a difficult conversation to continue to have when at every turn where there could be an opportunity for more representation, it doesn't happen. And it's not necessarily through anyone's fault. I think it's the construct.
well,
And perhaps this will incline some folks to revisit the construct and how this works, and that maybe it needs some work. But these seats, the board seats are 2-year commitments. So we're looking at 2 years before those flip again.
well, there's
And
another.
that's,
They cycle through, but anyway, the
of
point
course, they'll
being,
cycle, but
The point being, look, at the end of the day, the next 6 months and the next year are going to be absolutely critical to our rebuild.
Yeah.
And if you don't have representation on those seats and the people that are doing a lot of the work that's going on out there, I know there's the nonprofits that are doing their part, but there's a lot of the community building and things that are going on at the macro level that, the EFC has itself a niche. And, whether it's going to be real or not is going to be up to the people that are leading it now. And,
Yeah.
we offered our chance to be a part of this and to have a voice there. And if they don't want it, then so be it, Shawna. I mean, it hasn't stopped us before.
Well, nothing stops us. I
Well,
maintain,
I mean,
as you
but like at
know,
the end of the day, it's just one more organization and one more voice
no,
and
I
one
hear you.
more,
I hear you.
you
It's one
know.
of those things that if I'm asked to step up for something and I think that I have the ability to actually in a meaningful way do something positive, I will throw my hat in the ring to do it. And I did, which I know you did too. It's really just a matter of good faith and community support. But as you know, like I did not campaign for myself because I don't care if I got that seat. It's not, I'm always
Well,
been
you
more
care
effective
enough
on
that you're
my,
speaking about it, but you're
well,
you're
not about myself getting there. I care about what the representation on that board looks like. And so
yeah.
that was my point, that I did not campaign for me. I campaigned for you and for someone
Well,
else, Daniel Harlow, who wrote our CSD, who's one of the group that developed the CSD that is just so incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to land use and all of the things that are critically important at this inflection point that we find ourselves at 18 months. And so that was my personal disappointment, was that people who had so much experience, decades of experience and knowledge, institutional knowledge, community knowledge of this community did not get in there. And those who are there, even if they are there on other merits that are real and legitimate, um, that is missing. And that makes me sad. So
well, that's
I was,
life.
I'm, it is life. It's life, but this is, these are big decisions, and I think so.
You
We'll
get
see
what you
what's
vote
going to
for.
happen.
You get what
Yeah,
you vote
you do.
for.
You do. Well, I hope that the folks that are on there um, really do have the time to commit to do that job, because a big part of it is going to be educating themselves on a lot of history and a lot of policy and understanding this community and helping it get where it needs to be. So we'll see about that. Because right now it's the community doing a lot of the heavy lifting for themselves, which is rough, but that is where we find ourselves. And, on that note, we're going to go into the next kind of the news story, has been, and I'm sure anyone who's online has seen this, about PUSD, Pasadena Unified School District, which is Altadena's school district, and the tree removals, right? So they have been saying that as part of their, kind of cleanup, that they have to remove all of these healthy trees. That's not a thing. They don't need to remove these healthy trees, but they're choosing to remove healthy trees, which is a lot of questions. But where this has really blown up is that when presented with community outrage, they've ignored that. When presented with arborists explaining you don't have to destroy or damage these trees and there's ways to keep them, they ignored that. So at that point, Pasadena City and LA County came in and said, hey, we're actually issuing stop work orders and we're going to cite you. Don't touch these trees. And they were, in so many words, told that they could kick rocks, like get off the campuses. You have no jurisdiction here. And we're ignoring the work orders, which they did, and removed these trees because their position is that they govern themselves, that they are independently governed, that the city of Pasadena and LA County are not the boss of them, and they don't have to follow their rules.
Only the
And
state is. That's
correct.
why
And
when a school district fails, the state takes it over.
yep. And it really made for, I know, an interesting conversation that you and I had about, who does govern who and where is governance headed. Right. And we were talking about what is setting up with this new county CEO role that
Hmm.
is going to be so much more powerful than the LA city mayor, that the LA city mayor position will effectively just be a figurehead. It's not
Well,
going to
it
be a
it
role with any
effectively is
meaningful
one
power.
now, but yes, I think that what you're saying. Look, the battle right now that you're seeing with LASA, the LA Homeless Services Agency or whatever it is, um, they are basically they're getting the county pulled 600 million out, And hang on. And so, when they did that, that 600 million was the big funding chunk, and that was for a lot of the affordable housing. Plus, you have La Casa now, which is also doing the homeless housing. So the only money left there was about 300 million for the what you call it. It's called the continuum of care for homelessness. So that is like the wraparound services. And there's a lawsuit going on because the federal government said they're pulling it, and the likelihood is that continuum of care is going to migrate over to the LA County agency. But the fight between the city and the county is indicative of this struggle that's occurring. And what the reality is if the county wants to, the county can do whatever it wants in the city, because the city is actually a sub political entity, or a political subdivision of the county, which is a political subdivision of the state. So, again, we know this from the incorporation dynamic. We cannot get incorporation in Los Angeles County unless the county grants it to us, because the county technically is the incorporation. They have to incorporate a subdivision of the county. That's why Altadena is unincorporated. So every city and town in this county, depending on how this works, is essentially going to be, if the county takes the LASA situation and moves it all over to the county, homelessness is now entirely run by the county and county-related agencies. You're starting to see a big, the education system. Look, LAUSD has a bigger budget than the city of Los Angeles, and that is independent. Right. So what is the city of LA doing? It's got its police department, its fire department. The county can do all that too.
That's all the money. We actually talked about this, I think, on our last episode.
And Metro is a county agency. The county is the 800-pound gorilla. That's why Lindsay Horvath did not run for mayor. That's why she wants to be county CEO. So
that's where all the power is. That's where all the money is.
It truly is. And you're seeing it. We're getting glimpses of it through what's going on with us here. And we're seeing all these nuances in government functions because of Altadena, because it's unincorporated, because it's county, because of PUSD, which is not even, it's a Pasadena Unified School District, plus with the water companies and what they're doing up there. It's all right here. I mean, that's why everybody said this was going to be a disaster when the disaster hit, because the recovery is so complicated because of all these entities involved. And, but what you're really seeing is if the county decides it wants to throw its weight around, they win. It'll be very interesting to watch the LASA situation, to see how that is played out and where the city and the county end up in all this, because that's going to tell you the future direction of where the county fits, because they're just grabbing as much revenue as possible.
Yep. But I mean, again, I think, I was going to say that we spoke about this, I think it was on the last episode we recorded, talking about, or the episode prior, but it was definitely in May. Excuse me, talking about, I think I inhaled a bug. I'm talking about the fact that, sorry, I have to be able to breathe over here to speak. It's a wonderful little side thing.
I've heard it takes the ability to breathe.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
To not be, contemplating an insect in your throat. So we talked about the fact that that budget is such a behemoth, and where the majority of it goes, which is LAPD, seconded by LA Fire Department. That's where all the money is. That's it. In fact, I remember specifically talking about the fact that it had been literally more than a year that any of our roads in LA City, which many of us, I don't care if you live in an unincorporated county, you're traversing LA roads probably daily, had been touched or any repairs done, because instead, and this was raised by their city controller, who was amazing, Mejia, but this was it was raised because he was like, yeah, in case you're wondering why the roads are like shit, it's because the LA City Council went ahead and voted to increase LAPD's compensation and their fund without figuring out where that money was coming from. So that didn't exist. So now LAPD is getting even more money, and streets are not being touched. It's absolutely wild.
There's another element to that too, is that they're purposely not doing the streets, because if they redo an entire street, they have to carve out bike lanes, and they don't want to do that because of some initiative that the city voted on. And it's as much that as anything else, if not more.
The point is that it's just all political chicanery. It's never about just actually doing what you are hired to do. And make no mistake, all of these electeds were hired to do a job. They work for us. And it is, at some point, like, just do your fucking job. And on that note, we're going to go back a little bit to our pal Prang, Jeff Prang, who is the, I don't know if I've even told, I think I may have shared this with you, Steve. And we've talked about Jeff Prang because he is our LA County tax assessor. And we've talked about him in the context of property assessments and reassessments and what people are going to be facing and what's going to be given to those rebuilding, as some sort of, variance versus what's going to happen in actuality. And the thing that we have raised repeatedly on this podcast and that you have raised in many of your Substacks was the fact that, on one hand, we keep being told, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, especially for like rebuilds with just that 200 square foot addition, like you're not going to have any kind of reassessment. You're not going to have a change in property tax. You don't need to be concerned post rebuild. But as we have raised, that doesn't exist in writing anywhere. Even though we keep being told that, it doesn't exist in writing anywhere. And simultaneously, Prang has been trying to push through already once unsuccessfully. Did the second time fail, or is it still just in process? We're looking at it, right, a second time where he's trying to push legislation again to do what he says is already happening, which begs the question, why does it require legislation if it's done? But this came up again because I was speaking a couple weeks ago to a local builder in Altadena who's working on a number of rebuilds, and they're a second generation builder and someone I've really enjoyed. One of the few I think is actually doing really great work, and they're nice guys. But they said, Shawna, do you know about this tax situation? And I'm like, what tax situation? And they went on to explain to me that when they started pulling permits and, going to the one stop and getting information from planning on taxation for their clients, planning was giving them a flyer that they had and they presented. This flyer that they, of course, presented to all of their clients as well, that said clearly everything that continues to be stated, that there would not be reassessment. Like for like builds with only a 200 square foot addition would not be considered, for a reassessment trigger, and not to worry. So 18 months later, they go into the one stop on behalf of some of their clients and, went to regional planning and said, hey, we're hearing that there is going to be reassessment. So is this true or not? And, they were like, well, we don't know. You have to talk to the tax assessor. Tax assessor is there in that department. The tax assessor, the representative who was there, literally sat there with the regional planning representative and this builder. And as the regional planning, he was presenting the flyer from regional planning that says, hey, no reassessment, and asking regional planning, well, how can this not be correct if this is what you gave me? They're deferring to the county assessor, and the county assessor rep is saying, yeah, we don't care what regional planning tells you. We make those decisions. They don't. And it was a very sobering moment because this person who was the rep from the tax assessors then went on to kind of, pencil out this very cryptic formulation for how this is going to work. And that, in fact, there will be a partial reassessment for the like for like rebuilds. And that partial reassessment, they use the example of one of their clients with a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath, a very modest, 1,400 square foot place where they had done that 200 square feet. And that 200 square feet alone was going to result in almost $1,000 annually in additional tax for people who were expecting no change in tax. It was an eye opener. And they were in particular really upset because, as you can imagine, they've been telling their clients, based on what they've been told at the one stop and what they have in writing, that this would not happen and not to worry. And worse, he said they had multiple clients who, despite being able to afford to rebuild significantly larger than the like for like 200 square foot larger, opted not to because of their concern around the tax reassessment and desire to maintain their current tax base. And that's not happening.
Well, again, I think it'll be very interesting to see how this all shakes out. But remember that this is a tax grab for the county. So
yeah. Yep. So I'm gonna wrap this up. There was another story yesterday that hit, and I'm gonna raise it because we've talked about it on this podcast quite a bit is the kind of the untold death toll. Um, and what we are seeing out there. And as we know, there've been so many excess deaths, people who've had, cardiac issues, respiratory issues, and who've passed, people who had other health issues that have been exacerbated by the stress and have passed. And then of course, suicides, of which there've been too many. And CBS LA actually just aired a story yesterday about a gentleman named Mark Rodriguez, who they covered right after the fire. And he spoke about having lost his wife in the years prior to the fire, and having lost her ashes and urn and their wedding bands, and like all of us, like so many precious, irreplaceable things that went with the fire. But he was somewhat, still, despite it being brutal, he was still somewhat optimistic. He had fire insurance coverage. He had some insurance. He was intent to rebuild, and quickly. And apparently, as his story was told, he went with a modular prefab company to do a modest 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. It's all he felt he needed. And he wanted to just get back on his property. And, he had been quoted an amount that was just over $300,000 to do that. And after making nearly $300,000 in payments across 5 weeks, where they were like, more money, more money, more money, they were trying to extract even more from him. And he was like, whoa, like, this is like, put on the brakes. This is not what I was agreeing to. This is not what I understood was going to happen. Keep the money if you want, but like, I want out. Just let me out of the contract. And they would not do that. And long story short, this man felt so pushed to the edge by the difficulties in rebuilding and the lack of support that he received, that he ultimately committed suicide. And his brother was doing this story with CBS because they had just sold his lot. And, as he put it, there's blood on people's hands. There's blood on this lot. And apparently the company, because he had not completed the payments, resold the modular home. The whole thing is so gross. And I wish I knew the name of the company. I'm going to try and find that, because, sorry, they go on the icky list. Even if it's contractually what it said, you just don't treat fire survivors that way. You're dealing with people who are so deeply traumatized. And it was heartbreaking, because, like we said, this has taken such a toll that so many people remain unaware of. And it's a number that no one is properly tracking. And I have no doubt it stretches into the hundreds at this point, between all of those various causes. And it's terrible, because I don't see it getting a lot better for people, not with the sobering data that we were seeing come out at this stage. So on that very cheery note, I hope that those who need help are getting help. That talk to a friend, a neighbor, a family member, a clergy member, like whatever it takes. I hope folks don't feel like they're alone, because no one is alone in this. Even if it feels that way, we are part of like the shittiest club that no one wants to be a member of. But I really hope that anyone who's feeling the despair that Mark did, knows that there's a community here to lean into, and obviously mental health services and a number of other things. And I think, is it 611 or 81? Is it 811 for mental health, Steve? We've talked about it before.
I think so,
yeah. There are resources, but you also have this community as a resource. And I really hope that people lean into that, because again, everybody here understands what you're going through, because we all are too. And we'll help you navigate things, and for example, get through a bad contract, or at least clarify a contract, so you know what you're dealing with. So with that, the big news, as you keep hinting at, is that we've been dealing with the beast that is now SB, or State Bill 1090, that was brought by Sasha Perez, our state senator, along with our Assemblyman John Harabedian, who co-authored this with support from Catherine Barger, our county supervisor, and with a lot of community unity, which is unheard of and did not happen accidentally. So let's talk about what this is. And there's been a lot of coverage, right? So we'll wrap up our media roundup that took 45 minutes to do, because we have so many stories to catch up on. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for the last 8 weeks. But there was some good coverage in a few outlets. LA Times covered all of this, and we'll talk about how this blew up and emerged and evolved and how we got here. But there was some great coverage from LA Times. There was even better coverage actually from the SGV Tribune. Thank you for that, Sam. Sam did a really great story, really in depth. There's some forthcoming coverage from LAist who expanded their story, and actually it should drop soon, if not late, if not at the end of this week, next week. And then there was a Cal Matters piece that LAist reran that was said, like, should Altadena get a pass from, these housing bills? And needless to say, that didn't really go over real well for Cal Matters, because it's a great way to set this up. Nobody's asking for a pass. Altadena is asking for fair and equal treatment. That's it. We're asking for equity. That's it. As you alluded to earlier in the episode, we were kind of left out in the cold, where the Palisades were exempted from everything right out of the gate. SB 9, 1123, and everything else that will come in perpetuity, because there's no time limit on their EO, on that executive order. What they did was make all of the Palisades a high severity fire zone, and based on that, exempt them from housing density. End of story. Altadena, of course, is much more nuanced, and I don't think that kind of blanket approach would have been appropriate here. But at the same time, having some sort of protections to keep the onslaught of developers kind of at the gates long enough for people to at least rebuild during a time when so many, again, remain dependent upon SCE litigation and insurance payments that are delayed and dragging on to get anywhere, to even start to begin the process. A lot of people are going to be at year 3 and 4 before they can even begin the process, if they can make it that far. And so having, well-funded and developers come in and do all of this before they can, or worse, taking advantage of people because they're so desperate. And for some, selling their lot is their only option right now. And they're selling those lots. And as we have discussed, which, if someone needs to do, they should absolutely be able to do. But as we've discussed, Steve, especially since the failure of AB 797, which would have maintained property values. What's that?
It would have set a floor.
Yes, exactly. It would have set a floor that is gone. You have people who are, in some cases, being outright lied to. There are developers saying, oh, I'm building a single family home, or, oh, this is for me, I'm building for myself or for family. And no, they're not. They're a developer looking to do a split, either a 4-way or a 5-way, or with 1123 up to 10 units, where there were previously only one. So it begs a lot of questions and raised a lot of concerns. So, again, if you listen to this podcast, you've heard all of this before, because we've been talking about this for a solid year at this point.
Yeah, but this one's different. I mean, look, the reality is and I think the example was, to me, it's the value, the underlying value of the land is critical to determining how these developers are getting in early right now. And, absent true understanding of what your lot is worth, people are selling too cheap. They think it's, my house, I have a 7,500 square foot lot. I had a single family home on that. It's worth $500,000. No, it's got 2 houses on it. Even if a developer buying that or somebody else buying that can put a house and an ADU on it. Now, I think there was an example of a lot that was sold on Mendocino over by the golf course. That this is another thing, is that people don't realize what their lot is zoned for. That was a single family home. They sold for about $1.6 million. Now, you can put 1R 7,500 on it. So 1 residential unit per 7,500 square feet. The lot was something like 37,000 square feet. So you can put 5 homes on that lot. Now, for 1.6, if those houses, those 7,500 square foot lots elsewhere are going for $500,000 a piece, times 5 is $2.5 million. That person lost out on $900,000 because they didn't understand the zoning and they didn't understand what that land was worth. You go start putting up 10 units on that, it's worth way more. And I go back to the piece that there's a piece I did. We were talking about, this is back to the whole affordability, religion that they found up in Sacramento, and everybody thinks we just start putting more and more and more on the market. Eventually supply will come in and take it all out. And it's not true, because I've lived in cities like Vancouver or Toronto where there's a ton of supply on and the prices stayed high. There are 2 things that affect supply, or the price of a home. Well, there's really one thing. It's the debt and the mortgage rate. That's the reality of it. And what the market rates can afford, what you can do in that particular market for salaries. the underlying land goes up according to what the value of the property on top of the land is. And this is the critical thing for people in Altadena to understand, is that your land is worth a hell of a lot more than people are willing to offer you for it.
Yep.
And when this window ends, when all this ALE expires over the next 6 months and all those homes get bought up by developers, the land values are going to skyrocket. And I've told people who I know that can wait it out to wait it out, because the land is going to be worth way more in 6 months than it is today. That's
Yeah.
the reality of it.
There's a fear too, and it's dovetails into a different topic, but there's a fear I know among some that once this SCE settlement happens and people, choose not to rebuild, if for various reasons they still cannot, or it's been too long and they just can't face it. We're going to have a glut of properties, and that's going to tank the market. So, I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. It could go either way. It could be a little of both.
I think that what'll end up happening is developer. Look, you heard on the call with the senator. They already told you the name of the institutions that are already lining up. The money is coming. The largest money manager in the world is lining up to take over Altadena. However they're going to do it, whether they're doing it with nonprofits, for-profits, whatever developer, they don't care. They're just coming.
But it is happening.
They're going to do this. And this is the thing, is my attitude is to Altadena, if you're going to sell, get the maximum amount of money for your property possible. Because
that's what you hope for. It's what you hope for.
Because that's
everyone.
what it's worth.
So
and don't let them lowball you coming in, say, because you think that just they're going to put one home up. I mean, sorry.
No, it's a lie.
It's a
and
lie.
even if they are,
whether nonprofit, for-profit, whomever. Because look, the money managers are going to put their money in through nonprofits too. They can put their money there as easily as they can put it through, the for-profit developers. It's all the same. Everybody can wrap themselves in whatever flag they want. At the end of the day, this is a real estate play. It has been from the start, and it will be in the end. Now, does it mean that the town deserves a breather of 36 months? Certainly.
It's an understatement.
But
that's nothing.
That's
what's being asked for.
Institutional money from coming in. I mean, if they want to wait, they can wait things out. They can do what they want, or they can go get if they want to get developments put in and they want to go maximize that development. Then why doesn't this is my point, and this is what I told the legislators. Why hasn't the county done, if the county were to set up a plan where you have density in certain areas and control the density as opposed to just being haphazard all over the place.
You mean if you had a plan? A plan?
That would actually satisfy the requirements of SB 9 and SB 1123, and you can get a waiver from the state. I think those are things that can happen.
Well, you're getting a little bit ahead of, but these are all excellent points. I mean, I've talked about this before. There was an opportunity, SB 9, which allows, for anyone who doesn't know, SB 9 allows eligible single-family property owners to split their lots and build up to 4 units total, which is also possible with our existing CSD prior to SB 9 if you were to apply for a CUP, conditional use permit, right? So this is nothing like, earth-shattering. It's been happening since prior to the fire. But at the time that this came up prior to the fire, it became the rule of the land for us, SB 9, because, to your point, there was an opportunity for towns and cities to exempt out of this by filing for an exemption with their own density plan. You had to just plan and provide that plan for how you plan to achieve that density. And not surprisingly, Pasadena did that. Everyone around Altadena did it. Sierra Madre did it. La Cañada did it. Again, not surprisingly, these are all cities, not unincorporated towns, but it happened. Our county did not do this for us. So we have been subjected to and kind of battling with this uncomfortable relationship with SB 9 and the problems it's created, and having it completely overtake our CSD or our community standards district that was, ratified by the county and took years to create and to create agreement on.
Carter stood up on the stage at Politico and said they're respecting the community standards district.
Yep. So, this it is important history to understand and to consider in the landscape of where we are. So how we found ourselves right now where we are with 1090 is the simple fact that this now came, these projects rather under 1123 were no longer hypothetical or theoretical, but in fact happening, as one developer in particular has snatched up 12, I think maybe 13 at this point, lots specifically for these 10-unit splits. And the majority, if not all of those, were east of Lake. And some of those neighbors who were actively, rebuilding homes or planning to were shocked because, they didn't realize that this was going to come here in this form. And I think a lot of people were shocked because, again, we've kind of had our hands full the last 18 months. And this was like, oh my gosh, it's already happening. So it was very much, like the sky is falling. And you had 400 odd people show up to a town council meeting last month. Like, what are you going to do about it? Everyone knew that was going to happen. Barger and Perez were prepared and were like, hey, we're going to put forth this legislation, this urgent legislation. It's a gut and amend bill, and we can get into that another time, what that means. Folks can Google it, but it's a bit of a Frankenstein. But it was like, let's get it together and push it forward right now before we go to summer recess. So this got pushed through after getting some community unity. And that community unity was required because, understandably, our true affordable housing developers, our true affordable housing advocates, our community land trusts, and those who are very much protective of generational families in our community who need to be able to build as they would choose on their lot under the current construct, which is not a 10 lot split. There's literally no families or individual homeowners or fire survivors doing that. Zero. This is all developers, outside developers. We don't want to hamstring folks from doing what they should be able to do. So very quickly it was discussed and agreed, as various groups kind of found ways to bridge and come together on this. And that's its own story for another time as to how that came to be. But it happened, and everyone agreed that this is how we need to move forward, and that the SB9 splits that allow four-way splits, that either we don't touch SB9 or we just know that our CSD needs to be amended if we're going to hold SB9 along with every other housing bill for a period of time. And right now, what's being discussed, what was hoped was 5 years, what's being discussed is only 3 years. It's nothing. I think in 3 years, people will still barely even be getting started. But at least it gives a temporary reprieve from some of this. But the goal was to do this in a way that it's not going to impact bungalow courts, not going to impact any of the housing stock diversity Altadena has always enjoyed, and that has always been a fabric of our community, or the density that is responsible, gentle density that comes with a plan that everybody welcomes. We have existing transit corridors. We have precedents for these projects. We have a willingness to have these projects. Like, Altadena is largely a YIMBY town. Like, yes, in my backyard. We're not a NIMBY town. We're a YIMBY town. So it was like, hey, why are we not looking at, and this again, it takes us back to the fact that we have no plan. Why aren't we looking at Lake, Lincoln, Fair Oaks, segments of Allen, segments of El Molino, places where multifamily housing, apartment buildings already exist, and mixed use, and doing something with that. We have the new Agave building that just went up, that is transitional housing on Lake. We have, prior to that, I think is it Matador, the building that went up on Lake that is specifically senior, lower income housing or affordable housing. And if the escrow closes, from what I hear, the Webster's complex finally sold, and that also went to an affordable housing developer. No one is opposed to that. Literally no one. What is being met with opposition is this, again, this very haphazard, Wild West approach to development that is going to put people in a situation where you have, like, I'll give the example of Punahou Street or Punahou. I never know. People seem split on how they pronounce it. It's like Altadena. I'm Altadena. But
it's like Tenoble and Tannable.
I know. Well, Tenoble seems like it should definitely be Tenoble, but what do I know? But at least to the ear,
depends on how long you've been here.
Exactly. I have no doubt someone would tell me I'm on the wrong side of that one. But for our sake of our conversation, let's say Punahou, because a lot of people say Punahou. There are enough projects on that street that, with like a 5-way split, a 4-way splits, that you're talking about a street that, if you're familiar with it, it is a very narrow street. It's difficult if cars are parked on both sides of the street. It's to pass. It's already like a 1-way lane of traffic. It's very difficult for emergency vehicles to get to that street. If one ever came, it wouldn't necessarily be able to easily access the street. And you're talking about adding dozens of cars with nowhere to go. So ultimately, a press conference was staged, and I'll share some press links in our show notes for people, as a group of leaders and organizations, including myself, came together. And, as you know, Steve, you participated. We were part of a panel to educate the community on all of these issues, that the town council convened, which was fantastic. And I've been very appreciative of how the town council has jumped in to step up and be supportive on this, and bring community together around this, along with others who are trying to do the same, myself included. So it has just been, it's been a very hard, fast process. We were in Sacramento last week for these hearings. And folks, it sounds like, hey, we're getting what we want, right? We got this bill, 1090's happening. Isn't it great? We had overwhelming community output. People made thousands of calls, that sent thousands of letters. We made ourselves impossible to ignore. And again, it sounds like we had a victory, because this bill passed both committees in Sacramento last week, the Housing Committee and then the Government Committee, unanimously. So clearly something went right. But at the same time, you have to read the legislation and understand what happened, that the full amendment for our affordable housing advocates and our CLTs, that language is not finalized. I trust that it will get there. But what came out that was problematic, and why I chose ultimately to stand down at Senator Perez's press conference that I was in attendance for and was supposed to stand with our community leaders for, was the fact that in the legislation that they pushed through, there has been inserted a 180-day vesting clause language. And what that means, that vesting period, is that even if we got the urgency clause, and an urgency clause would mean that when SB 1090 goes through, which would be in August if it does, when it gets signed in, that would be the next hurdle.
October.
Thank you, October. Well, August is the next hurdle. October it would.
It automatically starts when the governor signs it. The governor signs bills.
If you have the urgency clause.
The beginning of October.
Correct. But what this would do, this 180-day vesting language, is give developers a 180-day window separate of that, or even with an urgency clause, to get projects vested, to get them in under the wire, and they would be allowed to continue and move forward. And as I said in Sacramento, to anyone who would listen, that is it's a death knell for us. I mean, that is beyond problematic. It sets up a situation that will be even worse than the current scenario, because you will have effectively a fire sale on the town as every developer rushes in to try and grandfather in these projects fast. And then we're going to be left.
Again, assuming they can get the approval. They can't get approval from the county if there's no building around it. So
it's tough. I mean, we come back to, and I'm going to share this because I think it's important for listeners to have this context, that it's about, ultimately, and I'm sorry, I almost got distracted by my own notes of the other bills coming. What was I going to say, Steve?
Don't know.
There's way too much going on. Going on. It will come back. But that, we ultimately, we have an uphill battle to climb, right? Mm-hmm. It's, we're not there yet. And I think that the community thinks, hey, we did our job. The community is going to have to really step up and do its job.
And that's going to be done by any stretch of the imagination.
And we're going to have to really fight, because not everybody who's working on this is working towards the same outcome. A lot of people are willing to just kind of lay down and go, well, this is the best we're going to get. And I don't think that's real. But to change it is going to require significant community pushback. And we're going to have to figure out, how that happens and how we organize that, because it's not always an easy thing when so many of our community members are displaced, and we do not have unified communications channels, and people don't know where to get info. And it's really tough. It's a tough situation. I don't know about this one, Steve. I don't know what to feel about it. You and I have talked about this quite a bit over the last few weeks, but to me, it's just a Band-Aid on a sinking ship right now, because this also doesn't address SB 1116, which is the Starter Home Revitalization Act that is coming right down the road. And You've also got AB 2005 coming down the road, which will enhance SB9 by removing the owner
Well,
occupancy requirement.
this is all. This is the problem with California right now is that they do politics through legislation. In other words, now everybody's on this affordable housing thing, and every elected wants to have a bill that got through so they can go claim that they did their part for affordable housing.
Yeah.
The big problem we have right now is in California. A lot of these look in the last year, you had 1123 pass. You had 79 SB 79 pass, which is the one with the transit corridors that everybody's losing their minds about. But that was supposed to create density in transit corridors within a half a mile or whatever of a
Yep.
transit stop along high density transit areas. You also had the CEQA reform that got through. Pause, guys. Seriously, take a breath and let some of this shit play out. Stop trying to add more to it right now, because what it is the developers basically have free reign, and all local zoning has gone out of the.
Yep.
It doesn't matter anymore. The state, what's happening to the city in the county of with the county taking over the city, the state is now taking over the cities and the counties, and the state's basically legislating. We went from NIMBY and nothing happening to now everything can happen all the time with whatever you want to do, and nothing's going to
With
stop
no
it.
controls. Yeah.
And it's
I
like,
mean, again,
whoa, guys,
yeah,
slow down.
we,
Let the reforms that you've created actually start to do their job. And
yep.
right now, all it's doing is it's this. They're all solving the same problem. It's all Me Too bills. If I was in Sacramento, that's what I'd be telling. But you're not solving the single biggest problem that exists, which is what is going to happen in 15 years when all the baby boomers sell? It's a supply distortion. Now you're adding supply to a distorted situation. We're going to have so much property on the market. And you know how many bankruptcies we're going to have, Shawna? Because everybody's debt is going to be fixed to the prices that we're at right now.
Yeah.
Like this whole
It's
situation is like typical government, nothing and now everything. And it's like
nothing. Yeah.
there's no controls because
No, there's not. And
they're all
I
trying to
mean,
make a name for themselves.
this gets us into this whole, matter of, the way that this legislation, what the legislation was written for, right? It's like people need to understand this term urban infill, right? All of these bills were written for urban infill. And what does that mean? Or, every community that is an established, built up community has that lot that is sat undeveloped for years, decades
Yeah.
in some cases, right? These bills were written for that. When you've got that 1 acre lot just sitting empty, let a developer come in and do a 10-unit housing. Great, fine. I don't think anyone reasonable
Yeah, but
would
nobody
oppose
thought it was going to
that
happen
use.
for a fire.
Well, but that's what I want to get to, Steve, is that what we are seeing now is that all of these housing bills, all of them, we're just tackling one in this legislation, not all of them, were not written as urban planning doctrine. And that's how it's being used because, again, there is no plan for the rebuild. So now it is this haphazard increase in density without a plan for any of it. And I think it's important to understand this key piece because this was written for urban infill, because of what was in mind when these bills were developed. There's no off-street parking requirement for any of it. So my girlfriend, Cara Vallo, who is Altadena west of Lake, who hosted the press conference that the community did on this. This was not one of the electeds press conference. That was a separate press conference. And I was saying that I deliberately did not stand up. And instead I sat in the back as media to ask a question because I wanted it on record about that 180-day vesting language because it's so critical that someone speak up and speak out about this stuff. If only for receipts, even if nothing happens, if only for receipts, right? But, the example that when we had our own community press conference that we all spoke at, all of our organizations and town council, and, there was Altena Heritage, who else? The Altena Tenants Union, the Altena Community Land Trust, myself is beautiful Altadena. And Kara spoke as Altadena west of Lake because we were on her lot. Her lot is a full acre. It's actually larger than an acre. And it is comprised, it's actually now that I think about it, it's 2 acres, but most importantly, it's comprised of 3 parcels. If Kara were to sell her lot to a developer, that lot would now be able to be built with 30 units. So that lot that has housed her and her partner, Mark, the two people, and prior to them, one woman. It's a horse property, and she had horses there. That would now be 30 units. So let's just conservatively say 2 cars a place, 60 new cars. Where? How? We didn't have water for the people who live here now. What the heck are we doing? Like, we need to talk about the billions of dollars that we've talked about this so much, all the money that is needed. And we had planned to jump into a conversation today about, talking about the money and where is the money, what's new, what's not, where is it, what's coming, what isn't, because we are in this critical moment. And I think we'll save this, Steve, and we'll record a second episode next week to talk about specifically the money, because, following the money is critical. But this is where we find ourselves right now. We are at this point where we are literally fighting. We've said this before, like, for the soul of the town, but we're fighting for what's left. There's not a lot left to salvage, but we're trying to fight for what is left to salvage, and continuing to fight for the right for people to want to come home, because as we've said repeatedly, it cannot be easier for outside developers to come in and buy up our lots and prop up for-profit housing than it is for a fire survivor to come home and rebuild. And that is our reality right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we find ourselves right time. It's so, I got to say, for everybody listening, this last month has been so demoralizing and depressing on so many levels that I was sharing with Steve that what I am doing for my mental health right now is working on my inventory. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, all of us fire survivors, it doesn't matter if we're a total loss or you had a standing home like Steve's, like, you lost content. Some people with standing homes lost all their contents. Obviously, those of us whose homes burned down lost every bit of content. You have to document for your insurance, and then whatever insurance doesn't cover or that you weren't covered for, you got to document as well for litigation. And if you're a renter who is uninsured or anything, you got to document for FEMA. You have to create a document that includes in detail every single item that was in your home. Good luck with that. It is such an emotionally difficult, traumatizing, re-victimizing experience for anyone to have to do this, but we all have to do it. And it's so bad that many people have just given up or have accepted they wouldn't do it. I had to enlist, professional help. I mean, it was a year that I was like, I can't even face it. Like, I was like, this will break me. This is the part of this experience that is going to break me, is detailing every single item I lost, family ashes, the heirlooms, it is so defeating. And what we have been dealing with on the legislative front and what we have been dealing with on the rebuild has been so soul crushing that I have been working on my inventory to escape that, Steve. I was like,
look, I'm exhausted. I mean,
oh my God.
the machine is, it's overwhelming when they want it to be. They're very good at this. This is what they do. And
It's brutal.
I'm aware that's the game.
It's absolutely brutal. So, we will continue this. I think next week we'll have another episode just talking about money and our nonprofit ecosystem and what's going on that front. But I'm going to close us out today. We're long, but not too long. I'm going to close this out with a little small biz shout out. I'm going to give it to Highlight Coffee, because I don't think I ever got to talk about Frank Kim. Frank Kim is the one who owns Highlight Coffee and his lime espresso tonic. And if I'm talking about it for a second time, I apologize, but I went through the notes and I don't think I did. To you, I tell you about it. I don't think I talked to the podcast.
This is the third time.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe you. I'm going to go through the notes. Now maybe I will have to.
Maybe
I copied and pasted the old notes.
Once when we were in studio, and now the third.
But I don't think I ever got it in, even though I wanted to talk about it.
Always talk about it.
I highly recommend people go have it. I also ran into, and I was telling Frank about this when I was in Spain. And for anyone who's interested, I wrote a piece on Substack about what's happening in Portugal in particular with their wildfires and how they're addressing their new fire reality. That was kind of interesting. But I came across, like, people were doing their own, obviously, like, Europe is doing things that are different and sometimes ahead of us. But it was an espresso coffee tonic, but it was being done with milk. And I was like, it was just kind of wild that it was like milk plus that. It was very interesting. But I want to remind people that Shant at Altadena Watch is back. I also want to remind people that Austin Scott, who is one of our local muralists, who's been doing so many beautiful murals around town, his latest mural at George's Liquor that got a glow up, and it's now George's Convenience Store, which is next door to Unincorporated Coffee on the corner, and they have that amazing vintage sign. I know I did mention that George's was back, but now George's is getting a gorgeous mural. There are some community painting days people should check out. I want to remind people that we have BA office hours, Wednesdays 11 to 1 at rotating locations. Find it in our group, find info on our Instagram stories. We share all the time. And I also want to say that, as I keep talking about the fact that there's no functional communication systems for Altadena, that everyone's kind of siloed and in these disparate corners, and not everybody's on Instagram or Substack or in a Facebook group or on a mailing list or a listserv or, all these things. I've been toying with this. I haven't even told you this, Steve, but I've been working on developing a BA alert system that would be either an email opt-in or an SMS text. And I think I might be ready to launch it next week. So let's see when we come back to record this episode if I've gotten it done.
All right. Well, another thing Shawna takes on.
Because no one else is going to do it.
I know, you're the mayor. All right, let's wrap it up.
I'm fucking tired is what I am, Steve.
I know, I am too.
So thanks everyone for listening. I think we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll try.
We're going to do our best.
All right.
I'm sure we'll have news because we've got another community meeting next week on Monday night. So
that's right.
We'll have things to talk about.
I'm Steve from the Alta Policy Wonk on Substack. And I'm not on any of the other socials. Beautiful.
Yep. He's only Steve. Steve is only Steve as Alta Policy Wonk on Substack. I'm Shawna Dawson. I am Beautiful Altadena. You can find us in our private Facebook groups. You can find us on Substack. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on this podcast and probably something else I'm forgetting because it feels like we're everywhere now and we reach like half a million people. Yeah, it's wild. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye now.